Hello, my name is Host Eric Coach, talking with Finnish people, and we're talking about forms of cognition by Viktor Gulenko. So it's a Socionics thing, and he says you're looking at three different dichotomies: static, dynamic, positive, negative, evolution, involution, and on 4 levels: intellectual, social, psychological, and physical. From these dichotomies are identified the cognitive styles corresponding to sociotypes. The features of causal determinist, dialectical algorithmic, holographical panoramic, and vortical synergetic forms of cognition are described. Also explored is their formative influence on modern philosophical paradigms and the special role of supervision rings in societal transformation of information. From the standpoint of their structure, cognition, in my opinion, is most successfully modeled by combinations of these 3 dichotomies: static, dynamic, positive, negative, evolution, evolution. Why these? I came to understand this relationship in 2 ways. First, I noted that most rapid and complete exchange of information occurs through supervision rings, which are formed by these dichotomies. Second, finding socionics analogies to other models by comprehending reality, I found that information exchange in each of the 4 supervision rings embodied fundamental forms of intellectual activity found across the history of established thought. If my conclusions are valid, then the mental activity of supervision rings constitutes that which cognitive psychology typically refers to as styles or forms of cognition. A strict deductive proof of this theory is not my aim. Instead, I will simply present the results obtained. Coming from the practice of consultation, teaching, and training work, inductive generalizations have far more weight for me than the mathematical calculations so dear to the hearts of some socionists. How do you determine that a person is actively thinking? Let us examine from the side. He first loses internal composure, then recovers it. He is using static dynamic. First doubts, then confidently asserts something. He is using negative positivism. First specifies concretely, then generalizes, moving from one logical level to another, a process controlled by the involution-evolution dichotomy, as I will show below. Emotional coloring, judgment speed, following the present pattern, i.e. logic, ethics, extroversion, introversion, rational, irrational, all play their specific role here, of course. But the 3 dichotomies which unite sociotypes into supervision rings exert a more noticeable impact on aggregate social intelligence in the form it has historically developed. This article emphasized the structural forms of cognition, not their content. My attention will be directed to what a person thinks, but how they think. In other words, the subject of my discussion will be on the instrumental and technical aspects of thinking. So, in general terms, this dichotomy refers to orientation towards either space or time dynamic. These categories of space and time are vital a priori concepts. Okay, so I've read this one before on an episode. I don't want to read this section again, but let's go here. Statics tends towards fragmentary analytic thinking. Dynamics towards associative synthetic thinking. And obviously I'm of the latter category. I would say we are all here of the latter category primarily. Well, JC, I'm not sure about you, actually. So, this talks about it's possible to connect anything in the mind. Here are some of the eidetic memory techniques in originating in antiquity. Roman orator Cicero used the method of loci to memorize his speeches by heart. He mentally laid out information in the corners of a room, mentally returning to one corner or another to extract as required. Medieval Dominican monks studying rhetoric used the same method. They took a road familiar to them to the last detail, and mentally walked down it, successfully laying along the road statements which would be presented before the audience. While speaking, they would mentally walk the route, raising key concepts they had previously laid there. Contemporary advertising cleverly exploits the dynamic side of human cognition. It is mainly based on the mechanism of association by context. Manly cowboy next to pack of cigarettes. Or contrast, ordinary laundry detergent versus advertised laundry detergent. Judging by this means of consumer inducement, advertising presumably influences statics much less than dynamics. Statics memorize more effectively a material is structured in rigid semantic relationships, where each concept is fixed in memory cells like a computer. So, JC, what do you think so far do you identify with more there, dynamic or static?
Static.
Okay.
I'm leaning towards static.
Alright, so
The thing with the memorizing by placement in the room, or that's just weird.
well, those are examples of like they're trying to come up with examples of a pure static approach to or mental stuffs. Fucking flies, fucking die. Um, let's see. So, thus dynamics are stronger in synthesis operation, not mere simple connections, but confluence of associations, while statics are stronger in analysis, not just any separation, but clear and precise delineations. Thus, the discrete continuous pairing has more to do with the static dynamic dichotomy than with the otherwise customary rationality irrationality. But then, what exactly is the latter? Irrationality indicates situationality, predominance of context over aim, while rationality indicates regularity, predominance of aim over context. Social level. Differences between dynamic and static types at this level correspond to the contrast between initiators and finalizers. Dynamics are stronger at the beginning, statics are stronger at the follow through. The dynamic is in a process of continuous readjustment of focus and drift of purposes. Because of this, the priorities of the dynamics are volatile and poor in hierarchical coordination. One wish may be quickly replaced by another, and it's difficult for them to concentrate on one long-term goal. The objective of statics are more stable and reliable. They know what they want and are able to maintain long-term focus upon it. They arrange priorities in their life and work with well-differentiated primary and secondary objectives that are rarely reversed. Statics are more successful strategists and tacticians. They know what to do much better than how to do it. What do you think? You know better what to do or how to do it?
What to do?
Okay. A predominance of dynamics in any social group renders it unstable, prone to endless change, and sensitive to external interference. Conversely, if predominated by statics, then rapid transformations prove to be impossible due to excess psychological inertia, rendering the group stabler but more conservative. So, this is the static dynamic one. Let's go to the positive negative one now. And this is simply...
Positivist, negativist.
Yeah, positive negativist, you might say, is just optimistic or pessimistic. Positivism, I understand, is the tendency to maximize the positive, and negativism as the tendency to minimize the negative. Oh, no, that's wrong. I was wrong when I said that. Positivists primarily perceive the positive side of any phenomenon and often turn a blind eye to the negative. Negativists won't overlook problems and simultaneously mitigate any positive aspects to their situation of interest. At this level, it manifests at the intellectual level. The positivism-negativism dichotomy manifested as identification of similarities or differences in object comparison. In negativists, thought processes prevails contrast. What? In negativists, thought processes prevails contrast. In positivists, leads comparison, meaning that positivists more easily hold overall views of an object without considering its internal divisions. Conversely, negativists more easily distinguish its extreme point of separation and opposing contrasts. Directly relevant to this is a dichotomy known in cognitive psychology as convergent-divergent thinking, discovered by J.P. Guilford. In his opinion, divergent thinking from simple initial data yields several different solutions to the same problem, a trait characteristic to the alternative thinking of negativists. Opposite of this, convergent thinking searches for the single valid encompassing solution, a trait more characteristic of positive thinking. Alright, so I like the fact they call it positive negative here. What they really should call it is AF-neg, right? This is AF-neg. This is what I was saying about the meta-rationality thing as well, that some people, you go through periods of affirming and negating, and it's easy to get stuck in that negating phase of pure rationality. Okay, social level. Positivism, negativism affects the degree of internal group coherence and regulates attraction and repulsion between its members. An individual's ability to assimilate into a group is typologically predictable. Negativists are remote types. They need constant assurance even in a group they consider their own. Therefore, it is more difficult to fully integrate negativists into a group. Positivists, on the other hand, are inclined to close-range communication. They do not polarize contrasts, but smooth them over in one way or another. Thus, positivists facilitate monocentric group structure and unity of purpose, whereas negativists amplify polarizing focuses and Um, whereas negativists amplify polarizing forces conducive to polycentric group structure. Consider the example of SEI, a fairly good-natured type, though negativist. SEI is a sensing, ethical introvert. That's
So ISFJ and
that's
CI.
ISFJ. Right. ISFJ. Consider the example of ISFJ, a fairly good-natured type, although negativist. Is there a behavioral tendency towards remoteness? Yes, it contrasts its subgroup with other subgroups, therefore disrupting, unintentionally or not, unity of purpose in the whole group overall. What process balances internal group cohesion? It is observed that positivists are drawn towards their opposite. Negativists, on the other hand, have an inherent paradoxical attraction to those similar to themselves. The nearer such parallel charge elements converge, however, it becomes increasingly difficult to implement mutual action. Repulsive forces rapidly emerge and fracture group integration. The overall incidence of monolithic or polarized group behavior is a reliable index for gauging positivist negative tendencies. Negativism generates tension in intra-group relations, leading, on the one hand, to an increase in psychological distance between members, but on the other hand, activating its internal momentum to stay moved. Positivism, by contrast, contracts psychological distance and encourages internal group cohesion, but can also bring complacency, carelessness, and the vapidity of existence. On a psychological level, this breaks down as trust-distrust. So, the relation between positivists and negativists is illustrated well by the analogy of electric conductors. Electric people, negativists who have accumulated a negative psychological charge, discharge into conductor people, positivists, who tend to provoke them in just the right way to do so, all of which happens most automatically and unconsciously. The resulting emotional flash establishing temporary balance of psychological potentials. This beneficial surge of emotional release, Aristotle in his Poetics called catharsis, psychological purging by intense experience. On the physical level, it says negativism induces body tension, and positivism are recommended to perform physical exercise that excites and intensifies their physiological processes. Alright, so that's the first of these dichotomies. It's all just on the... Oh no, we did static and dynamic, and we did positive, negative. Well, let's just go ahead and do the third one then. Well, let's say the third one for next. Let's just do these two first. Alright, so what are you guys' thoughts on either of these? The static dynamic dichotomy, we talked about JC's feeling static. I'm assuming you're feeling dynamic, Unify, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, what about positive negative? This one's a little bit more tricky. What do you guys identify with?
Negative.
I think I'm a positivist.
Right.
I'm a negativist.
Well,
I'm always opposite NTPs.
yeah. I think type-wise I'm a negativist, but I don't feel like a negativist right now.
Oh, you could be. I mean, maybe you're not. I don't know.
But see, I'm looking at this thing right here. It says...
You do disrupt a lot of shit.
Yeah. That's true. I think that's kind of unavoidably true.
I think I think it's going to be hardest to find the feelers who are negativists and the thinkers who are positivists is probably going to be harder to figure out what they are. I think, I'm pretty sure I'm a positivist. It's kind of, I'm pretty sure. I can't see myself being anything else.
You're looking for a resolution to affirm. Well,
But
so those are two possible dichotomies that he's saying. What I think is interesting about this notion is he's coming right out of the gate and saying directly, I think these ones are more important dichotomies than the ones we normally prioritize. We normally prioritize extroversion, introversion is one of the dichotomies he mentions, and rational, irrational, and another one. I don't remember the other one. He says these ones are actually more important, possibly. And I like it for that reason. Go ahead.
sorry.
My bad.
I remember looking up the positivist, negativist one briefly. Like what types fall where, and it was kind of, to me, was like kind of weird. I was just like, oh, this is kind of. It was something like it was different for every quadrant. Like two of the quadrants, it was the extroverts, and two of the quadrants was the introvert. Like it was something like that. You know, it was something weird. Like it didn't go by any specific function, cognitive function, as if I remember correctly.
Well, it's linked to the supervision rings, and it does have something to do with the cognitive functions, but it's some combination of them plus factoring in where they land. You know, so it's like impossible to make it clear. Like, oh, well, that's FE. It's like, oh, that's FE plus TI. If and only if they are in the 4th and 7th slots, you know, it's like something super complicated like that, you know.
Oh, okay, sure.
Okay, so Unify, what are your thoughts on positive, negative?
Well, I've always been a negativist. I'm like JC, I can't really see anything else to be.
Do you find
Like,
that...
I can't,
do you
like,
think
any
that's
argument I have, like, even with you, any argument I have is basically just me pointing out shit that's wrong. I don't, like, start arguments, but I just, like, you say something and I go, well, that don't make sense.
Right.
That's every argument I've ever had.
Well, I mean, do you affirm anything, though? Like, what do you believe? What are some things you could affirm?
For me, everything is like a possibility. Only on the fence.
Right.
I'm always on the fence about everything.
You don't want to commit because rationality has shown you that when you commit to a given idea or concept, that it breaks down once you hammer
Yeah, it
on
might
it
feel.
enough. They all seem to, right? Like they all seem to break down when you hammer on them. It's a good enough reason to want to withhold judgment. But JC, you don't do that. What do you affirm, JC?
I affirm myself.
I affirm
I
JC.
think.
Sometimes you
Yeah.
affirm JC when you're in the right mood.
I think that might be it. Like, I remember someone had asked me something, like, I don't know, one of the forums maybe, someone had said something along the lines of, like, what are you sure of? And I was just like, well, I'm sure of my own feelings about things, and that's about it. You know, like, I can't really be sure of anything else, but I can be sure that, you know, I think this specific thing about this.
Right. Interesting. And I like the way that he describes it specifically as negativists attract each other, but positivists attract negativists or something like that. Because if we didn't attract each other, the negativists would have a hard time of it, right? We'd always just be like the bad people. We can be pretty positive about negativism with each other, right? Like two negativists getting together can have a pretty positive experience of being negative.
Two negatives make a positive.
Yeah, right. Two negatives make a positive. All right, let's end on that note. Thanks for watching Talking Space People. We've got few more people arriving, so let's open it up and talk about some other things as well.